Anything said by any of us is not representative of KREIA. It's our own personal opinions. Thank you for coming to see us at noon today. We've got Bob Gurman and Fred Levein. They've both been around the block for a long time, business partners. They weathered the storm in 2001 and 2008 and grew during this time. If you're looking for doom and gloom, this is not the call to be on, because we all have a really optimistic view about the market and how we can take advantage of it. It should be a real treat. Bob, why don't you start and tell everybody about yourself and why you kicked butt in 2001, 2008?
Sure. Rob, thanks. So my name is Bob Gurman, and I bought my first rental house in 1996. Had a really good job prior to going into real estate, running a manufacturing plant for a young kid. It was a pretty good gig. I quit all that. I bet everything I had to go into real estate. I used to use credit cards. I had about 180 grand on different credit cards and credit lines, and I took out a home equity line on a house, and I used all that money to start buying rental real estate. And that's what I did for probably the first 4 or 5 years. Just bought single family rental houses with my cash, got them rented, financed, got my money back out, and kept the machine going forward. I became a real estate agent that very first year. In my entire career, and I don't know how many deals I've done, many hundreds of deals. I've really only ever had one house not appraised, and it was the very first one I ever bought. And there was an old guy who was a FHA appraiser, and he said, "Bob, you need to become a real estate agent. You need to be able to run your own comps and come up with your own true values of what a property's worth." And so that's what I did. And anyhow, my career kind of morphed from single family residential. I started buying multifamily apartment buildings in the Highlands. Because I was a real estate agent and kept running into so many people, it was never my intention, but I started becoming helping people buy and sell houses. I really started kicking down 6 figures as a real estate agent in the early 2000s. I used that money to live on. I let all of my real estate investing stay inside my real estate investing. I'd always told myself 100 single family rental houses was kind of the magic number. I picked that out of thin air. I don't know why I thought that was a good number, but I just felt like I could manage 100 houses. But the deals kept coming, and that's when I started getting into flipping. Actually went to Paper Power by a guy named Ron LeGrand in Atlanta, Georgia. And I learned about paper, and I bought the tape set. There was a bunch of us. We didn't have much money. We all pitched in and bought one set, and then we pirated it. And anyhow, I started doing some flips. And anyhow, long story short, that's kind of my career. I we'll get into this more, but 2008, 2009, 2010, I crushed it. And I think some people's, I'll use the word misery, some people's problems are other people's opportunities. And I just want to always make sure that I'm in that position to take care of those opportunities.
Fun fact, Bob. Did you know Ron's one of my clients, actually? How funny is that? Small world. He actually reached out to me about doing my quarterly investor luncheon this summer, but who knows what the world looks like. But yeah, small world.
That's great.
Fred, tell us about you. How did you get started?
I started investing in real estate when I was 24, buying my first duplex when I lived in Pittsburgh. And I've worked in both commercial, at a major bank. I've worked at both the commercial real estate department and the foreclosure department. For the past 21 years, I've been a real estate broker specializing in investment property, multifamily, small commercial rentals, and distressed and bank-owned properties. I've sold thousands of those investment foreclosed properties. I currently own over 200 rental units, mainly multifamily and small commercial in the Highlands and Crescent Hill. And my best years in the business were during the worst recession, the 2007 to 2010 period. That's when banks had to unload properties and they called me. And when investors were looking for deals, they called me as well. Today I own my own brokerage, Think Real Estate, and I work mainly with past clients and investors, helping them with their portfolios and working with them to plan their financial future in real estate.
How did you guys start working together?
So probably close to 20 years ago, as I was selling these foreclosures, I did a lot of research on investors to build my investor database, and I realized there was a guy that was buying a lot of property in the area where I was getting foreclosures. So I dug up his home phone number, left him a message, and he called me back. And so Bob was a client of mine for several years. In fact, still probably owns some of those houses. I sold him that many years ago. And then he approached me because I was investing in multifamily in the Highlands. And he said, there's a big building in the Highlands that I've wanted to buy for months, for years. Why don't you dig up who owns it and we'll buy it together? And it took me about 6 or 9 months to do that. And then eventually we did.
Let me tell you a quick story about that. That Fred calls me, introduces himself, and then he had a little crappy house. I can't remember the name of the street. And he said the investor who was buying it took the bank like 4 months to clear up the title. And so the investor who was buying it for cash, by the time the bank finally got the title work cleared, then they wanted to close, but that investor had used his cash to buy some other things. And so he wasn't in a position to close. And Fred said, listen, help me out. I really need this to close like tomorrow. And it was a junky, crummy house in a neighborhood that I didn't buy in. And anyhow, I bought it. And because I took that Ron LeGrand paper power class, this was my first flip I ever did, actually. And then I put an ad in the Courier Journal that said investor special. And some guy called me up and I made $3,500 on that little house. And that was the first deal. But that really was the start of mine and Fred's relationship. He said, I'm in a pickle and I need this house to close. And that was, I want to say that was in like 1998, 99, something like that.
Gosh, that's a long time you've been in the business. Okay, so let's get started. I've got some questions, but we can digress to whatever you guys want to talk about. We can hit whatever you want. I'll monitor the chat for questions from everybody else. But guys, they're a wealth of knowledge. I would ask a lot of questions. I mean, to be able to scale when things are bad, you've got to be looking and thinking differently. And I think these guys can help plant that seed with you on how to think differently and approach people and approach business differently, and be optimistic throughout all this.
Rob, let me tell a quick story. So
Sure.
if that's cool. And I think
there's no rules.
It leads into what you're talking about. So in 2008, Fred and I bought a little 9-plex down on Baird Avenue. Maybe we bought it in late 2007. And the plan was to convert these 9 little apartments into condos. That was all the rage back then: buy an apartment, turn it into condos, make a bunch of money. And we were, finishing up maybe we were halfway through our rehab. 2008 starts sliding in. We had a construction loan. We were doing draws. Republic Bank, who I still bank with, I love them. But they became really difficult to deal with on the construction draws. They had gotten beat out of some money from some other investors. Our total plan was to sell these things as condos, and we were able to sell 4 of the 9. And then it just absolutely dried up. In 2009, there was just no banks lending on condos. And so, the point to how to succeed right now in 2020 is you need to be flexible. You need to be able to change your business model. You need to think outside the box. And, we wound up having to rent those other 5 units, complete the project, rent the other 5 units. Certainly not our plan. We were fortunate to have the capital to finish it and then to refinance it and pull some money out with before sales and what have you. ultimately, the rest of the story of what happened with that little 9-plex is, fast forward 6, 7 years, those 4 people that bought, 2 of them wound up going into foreclosure because they wanted out. And Fred and I bought those 2 units back at the foreclosure sale.
For less than we had sold them for.
For less than what we bought them for. And then we worked out deals with the other 2 people. And we took the whole building back, and then we undid the condo regime, and then we sold it as an apartment building.
So we actually made money twice.
That's the dream, right? Resell and resell. So you guys were doing a lot of, you're building your infrastructure in the governor's sale back in the day with Joe Burnett?
What?
You guys were at the commissioner's sale? I don't know why I said governor.
I never bought that many properties at the commissioner's sale. I would buy selected properties at the commissioner's sale. There's a couple guys, Joe Burnett. If Joe Burnett saw me at the commissioner's sale, he knew something was up, because I just didn't. For me personally, I felt like I would spend more time researching a property to buy at the commissioner's sale, driving around, looking at it, trying to get into it, all of that, than quite honestly, than I had as success. I used to buy almost all my houses off of the MLS, and I would use a 1-page contract, and I would sit down and I would fax out 25 offers a morning. I would get up at 7 a.m. I looked at the daily hot sheet. I'd see what was good. I'd send out a 1-page offer, giving me a 24-hour right to walk through the house. I would get 5 people who would call and really be mad at me.
Yeah.
Because now they had to work some offer. I would get a couple people that would call and say that one's sold, what have you. But then they would tell me about some other house that they knew of that was going to be coming, And anyhow, that's basically how I bought almost all of my houses, but not through the commissioner sale. But I probably bought 5 or 10 houses through the commissioner sale over the years.
Hey, Rob, a couple of my clients say they're not able to log in. I've given them the password.
I've not changed the password or anything. I just resent everything in the chat. So if anybody wants to share it to anybody else, I'm getting a lot of texts, but I'm also being really monitoring that who's in the chat, that I like names I don't recognize, anything that looks crude.
Well, and you may not recognize these names. So.
Yeah. Well, if they have a first and last name, it's fine. But if it sounds like it's a bad word, if you put the words together, I'm like,
oh yeah.
No. Okay. So let's go back. Okay. So what do you think is going to happen in the future? I mean, just in regards to, deals, do you see appraisals going down? Do you see a huge rise of inventory? Do you see a lot of foreclosures happening? What do you think will happen moving forward in the next few weeks, next month, next year? What are your thoughts?
I started noticing an uptick in foreclosures even before the virus happened. Yeah. So I'm noticing some increase in foreclosures. And also a lot of investor clients that are just calling, concerned about what they can do to prepare themselves, because they know there's going to be some opportunities coming up. And I've been telling everybody what I've been doing is really trying to streamline my business. I mean, I'm doing everything I can when I have spare time to evaluate what I have been doing and stuff that I've been putting off. For instance, I'll usually be too busy to evaluate the insurance on all my properties. So I started doing that a couple weeks ago and realized that there's several $1,000s of cost savings that I've now been able to achieve by changing insurance. And so I'm not looking at this as I'm still looking at this as being able to work on my business, even though I may not be able to work in the business at the moment.
I think that's a really great thing to highlight.
So I think, the question is, yes, I think there's going to be more foreclosures. I think that it's going to be difficult if you've been reading about financing and the liquidity in the mortgage market, and a lot of that is drying up, which is where a lot of investors we're not borrowing through Fannie and Freddie and FHA, though you can do I believe you can do 4 single family rental houses through.
I think it's 10, Fannie and Freddie.
Is it 10 now? Okay. But so yes, some investors are going to have difficulty getting money. But let's say you run across a great deal, you don't have the liquidity to buy it. But there's going to be opportunities for you to hook up with those people who can buy it. And you can skim off a little bit of money. Maybe you want to keep it. So what I used to do in 2009, 2010, because there was also problems with people getting money, I was able to buy houses, foreclosures, at unheard of prices.
Yeah.
I bought one house off of Shelby Parkway in the low 30s. This house had sold. It was a newer construction in the 2000, built in like 2000, sold for 125. I think I bought it in the low 30s, And so what I was doing was I would carry that. I'd sell it to some other investor who wanted to rehab it. Maybe I'd sell it to him for 45. Still a great deal. He's got to put his money into it to rehab it, right? Mm-hmm. To fix it up as a rental house, fine. He's using his money, so he's got to have some liquidity through credit cards, through a home equity line. You've got to be able to find something. But anyhow, then he turns it into a rental house, goes out and rents it. The banks at some point still need to lend to people. Okay, mm-hmm. So I think that's one avenue that's going to be some opportunities for folks to pick up some and maybe add to their rental inventory. I tell you, so I had a project, 2008. I was building a new personal residence for myself, relatively nice, expensive house. And so I sold my primary house. I didn't know if it would sell in 2 weeks or take 4 months. So I put it on the market. Of course, it sold in 10 days. Okay. Then I moved into a house that I was flipping. Okay. Lived in there while I built my new one. It gave me all sorts of cash to use to take advantage of the market. So for other investors, it's what can you do right now to get yourself some cash so that you can take advantage. Obviously right now there's no evictions. Obviously right now there's no foreclosures. But there's going to be a lot of fallout over the next couple years from this. And so it's how can you position yourself to take advantage of that? Fred? I don't know.
Well, again, I'm really big on if there's any downtime. I have friends that have a lot of free time to watch TV. I'm busier now than I've ever been. I'm spending a lot of time where I haven't automated my business before to do that. So if you're still handwriting checks, look into checks you can print through QuickBooks. If you're not using QuickBooks, look into QuickBooks. If you have real estate, you haven't put it on a master key system, which is one of the best things I've ever done, do that. Try to make the business as efficient as possible because there's opportunities that are going to come up and you need to be able to take advantage of those. One of the things that when I had taught my course on investment real estate at Bellarmine, one of the more popular subjects has been self-directed IRAs. If you've heard about it, there's a lot of investors, I recognize the names here, that have been doing it for decades. But if you're a new investor and you haven't done any investing with self-directed IRAs, you really should look into that. It takes some time to do some research, but you could use that if you know people that have them. Of course, you could borrow from them in this environment, but you could also lend if you rolled over 401k or an IRA, another IRA. You could lend, you could buy property, you could use that as an investment vehicle. And I urge you, if you're not doing that, to take the time to look up self-directed IRAs and consider doing that, because any downtime that you have that you're not able to go out and do what you usually do is not downtime in the business. You can find lots of things to do to improve and make your business more efficient right now.
And well, another benefit of self-directed IRAs is in Shively and Butyl, they're doing like a 1.5% tax on flips and rentals. And if it's owned in a self-directed IRA, you don't have to pay the 1.5% tax. which is kind of cool. Or that's what I've been told. So I don't know. Ask Hampton's girl out. Hampton does a lot of that stuff. No, I think that's great. I mean, so you guys can correct me. I don't think Broker Metrics is probably updated yet, but Brian Halsey in our last call said that we went from 5,200 to 3,900 agents just overnight from that April 1st. I mean, what do you think is going to happen with the lack of agents? Do you think that's going to trickle down to builders and everything else as well? Or do you think it's just, we just had dues due and, just normal turnover?
Well, the last time there was a big drop, there was just more business for those that remained. I think if you work harder in the business, it's just going to come. Like Bob and I both said, the down years for most people were absolutely the best years. I sold more units than anybody in the city in one of my best years during the recession.
Mm-hmm. And here's something that I found as a realtor during those days. People were scared. And so they wanted people with experience. So if you were a new agent and you had done just a couple deals and you really weren't familiar with working with banks and short sales and investments and working through a lot of that stuff, people were scared. And so I needed to market myself as the guy who, for 15 years, I've been working with distressed properties. I know what I'm doing. And then I got the listings. And then I got to work through it. And so, yes, I think that there's going to be a lot of real estate agents that flush out. I don't plan on being one of them.
Sure.
And I think that that's the point. There's going to be a lot of investors who their business model of getting a house under contract maybe, and then flipping that contract to somebody else, that may change. That property may need to go onto the MLS to have a different exposure. Maybe you need to get your real estate license so you don't lose that income. Maybe you need to find investors who can actually close on the house with cash. Maybe you need to rehab it. I just think that you need to be flexible in the business model. I do think that, look, a lot of investors say don't become a real estate agent. You're talking to the wrong one. I became a real estate agent. I'm a broker, by the way. So Housing Associates, we've got 27. I think I have 27 agents in my firm. Most of them have some affiliation with investing, be it wholesale, be it retail, be it new construction. So anyhow, I think being a realtor has been helpful, but I do think some will flush out. But I think that'll be opportunity for those who can figure out how to
capitalize.
Yeah.
Tastefully capitalize. Do you see? All right. So in a shifting market, you're finding ways to cut costs. Do you see people moving from these bigger box brokerages like Keller Williams and Remax, cutting down on their expenses from $24,000 to $7,000?
I do. I mean, yes, I don't understand why anybody would be with those big, huge firms, except when you're brand new. I think when you're a brand new realtor, the Keller Williams, the Seminins, those that have those education programs that teach you how to do it, I think they're great. And I think being a part of a team for 2 years and learning the business, I think is great. But I think if you've been a realtor for 4 or 5 years, people are coming to you because of you, not because your name says Remax. And that's just my opinion. I'm sure they will tell you something different, but that's just my thoughts.
What other stuff are you guys going to do to lean up your business, to cut expenses so you can but stay functioning? I know Fred just mentioned that he's gone through and looked at his insurance and found out where he was losing more money. I mean, so are you shopping around other things as well?
Well, again, I'm trying to be as efficient as possible from a time standpoint, because I used to handwrite all my checks and several years ago switched to computer written. And I still know investors who do most of their books on paper instead of QuickBooks. Anything I do to shorten my time means more time I can spend looking for deals, certainly. But
interest rates. So, interest rates, if you're able to get the loans dropped significantly. And so just, 2 weeks ago, we were able to take a couple buildings and change our terms, lop a point off, able to fix where maybe they had 3 or 4 years left before they armed, going back to the banks and saying, hey, our rate's good, but we could get a better deal if we switch to so-and-so. Will you extend our term from 3 years to 8 years, and taking out that interest rate risk that might be moving forward?
That's gold, because I've been on a lot of these calls and no one's brought that up. Maybe try to negotiate getting rid of your arms. I think there's a lot of value there. Are you refinancing a lot of your stuff?
Well, I got to tell you, Fred and I, in partnership of a couple buildings, we did a couple loan modifications and changes last week. We saved ourselves over $250,000 over the life remaining on some loans. So we didn't have to do anything other than
a phone call, being proactive.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Now is the time, certainly, to try to refinance or modify anything that you've got. And it may just be keeping the rate, but fixing that rate longer so you don't have interest rate risk, which is really important to us. Or sometimes shaving off a year or two, which saves a lot of interest. I think right now the best thing you do is be liquid. Mm-hmm. If that means either refinancing, and in some cases taking out some equity to be prepared for future investing. But in some cases it also means maybe selling some things that have been underperforming, or maybe things that you bought when you first got in the business and you're upgrading. The market is excellent right now. I've been selling off a lot of my single families the last few years to concentrate on my multifamily. And then I have clients who are selling some of their smaller multifamily to buy something bigger or some small commercial. Mm-hmm. So the market is good. With interest rates low, it doesn't mean people aren't buying. They're out there. There's newer investors that are buying things. There are homeowners that still need affordable houses. So that's another way to raise some cash for something you want to reinvest in when the market's going to give you those opportunities.
Do you think we're going to start seeing a decline in prices in the next few weeks, or do you think
yes?
You think it's in the next few weeks?
Oh, in the next few weeks? I don't know that you'll see it in the next few weeks, because I think that sellers are still going to hang on to that notion that their house is worth. Mm-hmm. But I think 6-8 months out, I can't really, there's a part of me that feels like once we get through all this, there's going to be a lot of jubilation in the market, and a lot of people want to do something. There's another part of me that says recovery as we come out of Corona is going to be a little bit segmented. Like some people's jobs are going to do good and other people's aren't. But yes, I personally feel like there's going to be some prices are going to go down. And I'll tell you why, because there's going to be a lot of people who can't, some investors who can't come up with the money to buy. And so I always say my worst competition is bad competition. Okay. So that means people who don't know what they're doing. All right. And so some of those people that don't know what they're doing are going to flush out, which means that those people who do know what they're doing are still going to be in the business, and they're not going to pay some of the prices that things have been selling at. I did just buy a house 2 weeks ago. It closed last Friday in the Highlands, a nice brick house that I'm going to try to flip right off and make a little bit of money. And if not, I'll rehab it because I know it's a great house.
Well, it's important to note right there, you have multiple exit strategies on your purchase.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think we're going to see a correction on prices, not so much on single families. I still feel like there's a lot of owner occupants that they're still out there buying. We're still having a lot of showings. We're still listing property and selling property. But I think when it comes to multifamily and commercial, banks are going to really be concerned on that income stream. Have tenants paid? Were they paying? Did you defer income? And that's going to affect appraisers then on their comps. It's fine looking back 6 months or a year for a comp, but if banks start demanding comps that happened during this phase, I can't.
That'll slow the market a little bit.
Yeah, I can't see what we would see.
I lost a deal last week because I had some out-of-state investors from California, and we had 2 quads under contract, and the bank came back to him and said, hey, we're going to need another 10% down if you want to move this deal. And that stinks. That was actually with Republic as well. They cleared up they're not doing any right now, commercial.
Yeah. I mean, that happened in 2008 also, like literally the day of closings where banks were going to, give you basically 100%. And they changed and they said no. And so you either
it was ridiculous. They were at that point anyway, though, right? But one thing to know, and you guys back me up on this, or if you have any more input on it. I mean, back in 2008, we lost so many builders, and our inventory is so low now, and interest rates are so low. I don't think we're like a turtle, we're slow to rise, slow to fall. I don't think we're going to have this major impact like you are on the East and West Coast, that their properties dropped $200K overnight in equity.
Yeah, I personally don't see, this is not the same storm as 2008, with the bundled mortgages and people who were fictitious getting loans and,
That was crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. So I do not see those kind of price drops that we saw. And I do think that while builders may have some difficulty getting construction loans to build spec houses, I think that they will still be able to get some loans to build. Interest rates are so low, and I think they're flushing liquidity into the marketplace so much. 2008, people were just scared to turn to the right or turn to the left because there was so much, I'll use the word fraud, but there was just so much goofy lending. We haven't seen that this time around. So do I think prices are going to change? I think prices are going to change, but I don't think you're going to see that total crush like we had in 2008.
So let's talk a little bit, Rob, about prices. And I know that you do a lot of assignments and so
I've never assigned. I've never wholesaled a deal in my life. I just kind of facilitate, try to help them out.
Excuse me. That's correct. My point being that I think that wholesalers and those that are getting houses under contract and assigning them are probably going to need to readjust their profit expectations. I think there's going to be some less buyers out there who have cash or be able to get financing, and they're going to demand a higher return if there's less competition for those properties. I think if you are a wholesaler or you're trying to sign, this is the time now to find those investors that have cash that you could go to directly when you've got a deal. Or find someone who has, for instance, an IRA with some money in it where you could privately borrow from them to do the deal yourself. I think those are things you can put in place right now, knowing there's going to be opportunities that are going to come up. But readjusting somebody's profit expectations, which is difficult. I'm not sure, like Bob said, homeowners necessarily will, but certainly investors are going to need to do that. All the reasons we already talked about with.
Well, I think there's the market's been in need of like a wholesale product because you have the hard money lenders for flipping and burring and whatnot. But I know Trey Gossam and Andy Love have a new product out with Annex Capital where it's like 2 points on the front and then 1% in the back or whatnot. It has to be a sliding scale based on purchase price, but I think closing on a lot of these and then putting them on the market, there's going to be a lot of value there because then you're taking it to the public, and then you still have more hoops to jump through with the inspections and Jefferson County fire alarm ordinance and all that stuff. But I think that's where you're going to find the larger spreads. Well, one thing that I think it was Mark, it might have been Dick Vreeland mentioned on Frank Miller's call last night, is that it's important to know that these deferences or whatever, that is going to be a ding on your credit. They have to report that, the lender. So I thought that was really important last night to note. So if you're thinking about deferring, maybe just think about it a little bit more. If you have the means to pay, I would try to pay personally.
Even if they say there's a moratorium on reporting to the credit agencies, one of the things I've thought about is certainly if you don't need it, I'm not sure you should ask for it, because those same lenders are the lenders who are going to go back to when deals present themselves and you need a mortgage, you want to do a modification or something. And you can say, hey, I did not ask for any deferment. I paid you even during those, tough times, guys. I'm going to be with you. You need to be with me. And I think that's something important to really keep in mind, because you don't want it to be a black mark on you, even if they say it's okay to do it, because they will remember.
And Fred, no one's brought that up. And I think that's a really important point. I mean, to be able to point back, I mean, you guys have so much credibility to say, I made it through 2001. I made it through 2008, just as realtors. But I mean, being able to say that you weathered the storm and you didn't ask for anything, I think there's a lot of value there. That's a really good point.
There is a ton of value in loyalty, and loyalty to realtors, loyalty to your lenders, loyalty to your title companies. My whole business has been built on relationships and not necessarily switching to the next bank that can offer me something for a quarter point less. Because that's not to say that I don't go back to my first bank and ask them if they can't do a little bit better, but I've closed many loans at a quarter point more with the bank that I do business with for the relationship. And it absolutely has been paid forward to me, even with the loan modifications that I did, a couple of weeks ago. The little building on Baird Avenue with the condos, one of my banks that I'm loyal with it took one of those units back in foreclosure, and so I just, whether this coronavirus was going on or not, I think there's a lot to be said for loyalty.
So tip your bartenders, but also use your same realtor and lenders.
Let's talk for a moment, Rob, if we can, about tenants who are starting to call landlords and asking for rent deferment or forbearance. And I fortunately only had a couple, but I've initially told them right off the bat, I'm willing to defer it. I'm not forgiving it, right? Because even if the banks defer, you still have to pay it. Now, what I'd like to see them do is try to pay whatever they can, and I'll put the rest of it on the back end of their lease as a possibility. If they're good tenants, they keep their place nice, maybe I'll take a little bit off their deposit towards that. So working with them is really important, because if they've been good tenants all along and you know that this is only because of the situation now, meaning they haven't always been slow pay, they haven't been, messy tenants or whatever, then it's just a function of what's going on right now. They will get over it and they'll remember you and they'll take care of you. There's no reason to get rid of a tenant or make the situation worse if the tenant is good. And I think that's really important, because, a lot of places there's a lot of news right now. You can, just not pay rent, and that's just not the case, right? You're still going to have to pay. And at some point, if you haven't paid, once you're allowed to evict again, you're going to get evicted. I try to tell them, look, let's just work together. We'll do something. I've always taken care of you. You've taken care of me.
We did. We started taking credit cards. So we signed up for Square, and I have had a couple of tenants take advantage of that. Square charges like 2.25%, which sucks. But, if they can't pay anything of their rent, but they can pay me half and put it on their credit card, and I work with them on the other half. When eviction court starts up, it's going to be packed. And so, you very well may have a bad tenant with you for 6 months. So it is much better to be their friend now, to work with them. So when all this started, as soon as there was some grant money, I think it may even be gone now, but there was some grant money that came out in Jefferson County. So I immediately contacted, I still have 36 single family homes left. I've sold off about 90. But of the single family homes left, I contacted each one of them. I called them on the phone. I talked to them and I said, hey, neighborhood place has some money, $1,000. Okay. I can't tell you the number of my tenants who are able to get that $1,000. That's separate than the Fed check that's coming back. But to Fred's point, you also need to make clear it's not a freebie. Like, we're not wiping out your rent. We're just deferring your rent. Anyhow.
Another thing, Rob, we're doing now, again, taking advantage of this downtime, if we happen to have a vacant unit, we are taking updated photos of the unit. It's a great time of year to take new photos of the outside, take a video tour, even draw out the floor plan, because you can take someone on a virtual tour. We're still renting apartments. I'm still moving tenants in and out of apartments, and you can do that safely. But all of this improvement that we're doing right now, we can use in the future for everything. So we haven't retaken pictures in a lot of our buildings because we've kept them full for so long.
For insurance too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You could show the insurance company improvements. Absolutely.
Well, I mean, just to have if there was like a fire or whatnot.
Oh, absolutely. For replacement costs. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you guys heard anything? I've heard 620 to 680 on the minimum credit score. Have you guys heard anything about that?
We've gotten some stuff emailed to us about that.
What are your thoughts? What do you think it's going to end up being? And do you think they'll relax that back to 580 eventually? Or do you think we're going to be 600 plus no matter what?
They're going to tighten it up for the foreseeable future. They're too worried about people and their jobs, I think. So the threat of risk that the market's demanding.
Yeah, one of the things you're going to see is a lot more loans going back to Fannie and Freddie and FHA, federally insured, because the private market right now doesn't want to buy the paper from ungovernment insured mortgages. And so Fannie and Freddie guidelines are a little bit more stringent, okay, on that minimum credit score. Another thing that's going on right now, right before closing, is they're absolutely re-verifying employment. They're making sure that the employer is steady. Okay, so you may still have a job today, but they're asking what's the likelihood that that employer is still going to be open. Right. And so you're going to see some fallout in contracts with that. So we sent out a memo to all of our agents a couple days ago. If you're representing buyers, if you're representing sellers, make sure you're talking to these lenders about what type of loans the people are in. So that is also something. So yeah, I think some credit scores are going to go up and some income reserves are going to go up, how much a person needs to have in the bank account to qualify for a loan.
Do you guys ever pursue deals as like subject to or lease option, or you guys really don't mess with that kind of stuff?
Well, we did back in the day. Absolutely, we did. During the recession, you saw a lot more of that. You saw owner creativity, flexibility, lease option stuff. I haven't really seen that much since the recession. Wouldn't surprise me if it comes back a little, but I think there's going to be a portion of the market that's very leery about that. They're going to want to really check out that buyer and do the same thing the mortgage companies are doing. What are they doing? Who are they working for? And so forth. A lot of people don't have cash reserves. So if they lose their job in this market,
I used to sell quite a few houses on lease options, and I stopped doing it. Quite honestly, if a person gave me $3,500, $5,000 on a lease option, the problem with it was when they went bad, okay, they took it out on my house.
Yeah.
And they beat the house up. So now I told them, I say, I'll rent it to you. Why don't we rent with each other for a couple of years, see how it goes. We can always enter into an agreement later, but I don't take that big money up front. I know some people, go ahead.
If you do it that way, I mean, do you not set a market price? Because if 2 years, you shall Shelby Park go from 30 to 220 in 2 years.
I don't set the price. I just say, let's look at it in a couple of years.
Well, and then it should note too that a lot of people right now, if you have good tenants that have been there for a while, people are saying, hey, we really appreciate you. We want to create more continuity, and they're trying to get a re-up with no interest increase of 2 or 3 with their tenants for them to sign 1, 2, 3 year leases. So now's a good time to do that as well. I mean, well, not in your business, but about or around your business. I'm miswording that, what you said, Fred. But,
right. You may not be working
yes.
in the business at the moment, but you're working on the business at the moment. You're right. I have heard a lot of my clients, investor clients who have been able to get 2 and 3 year leases, especially if they're, either keeping the rent the same or even going up just a small percentage. And that's where you really make your money on rentals anyway. You can keep somebody there for 3+ years. We just had a tenant move out after 52 years in the same apartment last week.
Wow.
He bought the building a couple times over.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're not wrong. And that's the way you got to look at it. I mean, the financial independence and freedom, it's the easiest way is rentals, right? Let's see. Okay, so what would you recommend to new investors? 2 different groups. One group that has maybe 2, 3, 4 rentals, and then one group that has nothing. They don't own anything, but maybe they're sitting on 20, 30K cash. What would you recommend to those groups?
I would think that the person that's sitting on 20 or 30K should sit tight for a little while. And I think that they should, continue on with their day job, make sure they've got their income. But I think they should be ready to pounce, because I do think that there's going to be some opportunities that come up. They can, maybe they get their real estate license so they can be that one who's on the MLS at 7 in the morning, like I used to be, looking for those deals that just got listed, able to really run what I call a true comp. Okay. Not a Zillow comp, but like a real comp.
Bonafide. Yeah.
And I got to tell you, there's going to be people like me who are going to be in a position to buy rental houses, who are going to want to sell them. And like I talked about before, how am I going to sell them? Somebody gives me 20% down, I'm going to carry the rest, right? I'll be willing to carry a house if somebody gives me 20% down, 25% down. So maybe that person who has 20 grand might be able to parlay that into 3 rental houses, 3 decent little, $45,000 rental houses in the West End. And those are my bread and butter. I just did great on those type houses. So for that person, I'd say sit tight. Fred, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. That 20 or 30 grand could certainly be your down payment at 20 or 25% down to buy some investment property. For the person who doesn't really have anything at this point, I think this is the point where you start trying to make those relationships with lenders, whether it's private lenders or it's banks, because those deals are going to come up. And it takes a while usually to get approved by a lender, and it'll probably take longer today to get all your financials together, take it to them, have them take it to their loan committees and all the different hoops you have to go through. But once you're approved, if that deal comes up, they're ready to offer you that loan. So again, you're going to take the time to work on your business right now to be prepared when it comes up. So there's a lot of things you can do. Strengthen your balance sheet, fill out those loan applications, talk to private lenders if you feel like you can't get a bank loan. There are lots of private investors. I'm looking on the group of participants right now, and I see quite a number of them that have IRAs that they consistently lend out of. There's a lot of things you can do, because when I've taught my class before, I've often said that the harder part is not buying the property, it's finding the deal.
Mm-hmm.
If you find me a deal, I will give you 6 different ways you will make money from that deal. Easily. You don't even need to bring a dime out of your pocket. But finding that deal is tougher.
And let's say you're those hungry guys. Fred and I are fat and old and tired now, okay? So we're not looking.
That's one of us.
So I'm not looking under rocks like I used to look under rocks to dig up deals, okay? But I know there's some younger guys out there who are finding these deals, and they may not have any money, okay? But by God, get those relationships going with the Freds of the world, the
Bobs of the world.
The Bobs of the world. But those people who really will be like, yeah, that's a good deal. I'll do it. And you may not make what you used to make on a deal, but you will make something on the deal. You'll stay in the game. You will survive to be here when the market changes again. Okay. And I think that's the key thing. What can you do to stay in the game? So, because this market, if it tanks for a year or two, but it's going to come back. And what can you do in those couple years? And I think there's a lot. And, you know, somebody dies, somebody inherits a house. Those people still want to sell that house.
Mm-hmm. Literally, I was on the phone with Bob earlier, and I was at a listing appointment this morning. First of all, I never go to listing appointments. Like, usually my clients come to me, but they inherited property. They still have to sell, and they came here from North Carolina to let me in. I mean, the world keeps turning, thankfully. Trying to think what else. What is there any one particular book or podcast that's been speaking to you? Doesn't have to be anything real estate related if you don't want it to be. Anything you'd really recommend?
You know, I always liked, and I've referred to it numerous times, I've always liked The Millionaire Next Door.
Yeah.
You know, it's gotten some age now, but it's really an excellent book, especially for newer investors.
It's really entertaining. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always one of my best go-tos for investors when they ask is that.
My thing I always think about with that book is like, you know, the average millionaire next door doesn't spend more than $325 on a suit. So if I spend more than $325 on a suit, I will not be the millionaire next door. I don't know. I'm an idiot though. But Bob, what about you?
You know, it's weird. I don't listen to podcasts, so I'm bad.
Yeah.
I don't read real estate books, so I'm bad. But I read a lot of history books.
Sure.
Because I think history kind of keeps repeating itself.
Sure.
And so while I can't necessarily single out one in particular right now, I'm reading a book about the history of World War I. And it's like super interesting how everybody was fighting with each other. I don't mean literally. I mean like inside, like Germany had 3 different fractions fighting with each other. And it's like, if you can figure out how to lead through that, you know, the person who figures out how to lead through that is the one that comes out on the other side. And that's why, so I just read a lot of history books, not anything in particular related to real estate.
Well, that's good. Gives you something to do. I'm reading Mitch Please right now, and it's really interesting. Okay. And let me go through.
Any questions? Anybody have any specific?
No question yet, but Todd Johnson said that the final income verification within 72 or 48 hours of closing, depending on the lender. Todd's
it's some last minute verifications, definitely.
Let's see. Well, no questions right now. You guys can reach out to me for their contact information. They're readily available if you have any more questions for them. We do have a call coming up on Monday with David Orange and Jonathan Klunk. They're big into Airbnb. Airbnb, unfortunately, is one of the biggest sectors that's been hit. But typically, they make like 2.5 times the amount of money a normal rental makes. So there's a lot of money there. So, I mean, right now, if you can find some Airbnbs that are commercial, might not be terrible to write a couple offers and see if you can lock it in and not really worry about the government changing things. Chris McCarty and I talked yesterday, and we're working to get a large meeting for the 4th Thursday of this month. We don't really have details, but we know National REIA has a Zoom call line that we can use, so we can put as many people as we want on it, which would be a real treat. We do have calls Wednesday next week for new member benefits of KREIA with Rick Luttrell. There's a lot of things there that I had no idea about, so I think you guys are going to want to learn about it. I mean, you can save a ton of money in your investing world. And then Friday, we're talking about syndicating with Chase Craddock and Lindsay Dukes and Luke Harbell. And I want to thank you guys for coming on. You guys are a wealth of information, very optimistic, and we appreciate that. It's not the end of the world. It's just, part of it.
To borrow a line from Dos Equis beer, stay liquid, my friends.
This is not the end of the world, okay? And in 2008, the day Barack Obama was 2009, January 2009, Barack Obama got sworn in as president. It was on that day I was at a lunch meeting with a bank, and they were going around introducing themselves, and lawyers and doctors, and when they announced that I'm a real estate investor. And the president of the bank in front of everybody says, "Ooh, I'll bet you you're You're very anxious. And I said, nope, I'm very optimistic. So he came up to me afterwards and said, why were you optimistic? Why did you say that? And I said, because you, my friend, are about to take back more houses than you know what to do with. And I'm going to be the guy who helps you with that problem.
Yeah.
He looked at me and he said, I'm afraid you're right. So just be fluid and be willing to look at things from a different perspective. I have always surrounded myself with people who are smarter than me and better than me. And I lean on them, not necessarily even in real estate, just in life. And I use them. And I think if you all do that and find those people, you can figure out your niche in whatever comes our way.
I'm fired up. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Fred. Everyone
you,
have a great day. Enjoy this weather. It is incredible. See you guys.
Thanks so much,
See you at
Bob.
noon on Monday.